That song, appropriately named Amazing. That was awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, I don't know if any of you have ever had a week where you have that, you come in on a Monday and you're like, ugh, you just kind of heavy sigh, take a second. And I had one of those on Monday, last Monday. And I just just to get prepared for the whole week, and it was cold, and you know how I get with the cold. So it was just one of those things where I just needed to focus on something I really wanted to do to get my week started. So I did that. I wrote the introduction for our guest speaker last week. That was my first thing I did for this week because I've been so excited about it all week. So I'm thrilled that can actually come to fruition right now. So let's get the formalities right out of the way right from the beginning. So our guest speaker today, Laine Morgan, has nearly 25 years of business and leadership experience with Education Management Corporation, where she currently serves as a vice president. For the past several years, she's provided extensive training and leadership consulting at a national level for the company, and she also has her own life coach company called Periwinkle Blue Coaching. A longtime Georgia resident, Laine has lived literally from coast to coast, and she will tell you that, and she has stories about each place as well. She holds her bachelor's degree in criminal justice and a behavioral science from Tift College of Mercer University and a master's degree in counseling from Georgia State University. Now that's the formalities. Now that's out of the way. Let's get down to who Laine is. So many of you already know Laine, or you may have met Laine. You may have seen her in her many supportive roles here at SLCA. Perhaps it was just sitting next to her at service with her longtime partner, Becky Booth, or her beautiful daughter, Kelsey Morgan. Or maybe you've just seen her stand before you as a licensed practitioner or a member of our board of trustees. But today is special and exciting because we all get to share and participate in Laine's next chapter, that becoming an ordained minister through the Centers of Spiritual Living. Knowing Laine as I do, loving, inspiring, and real are just a few of the words that come to my mind if I were to attempt to describe her. She is a motivational being who has the rare ability to speak from her heart. Personally, she has taught me that we can all live happier, richer, and healthier lives if we are willing to challenge our beliefs about who we think we are and what we are capable of accomplishing. Here to help us challenge some of those beliefs right now, I could not be more proud to introduce Laine Morgan.
Wow. Thank you, David, for such a generous introduction. I want to thank David, and I also want to thank the choir. Thank you, Penelope, and the choir, wherever you went to. Thank you so much for that song. And this was not planned, but that particular song is an anchoring in my spiritual awakening. When I wandered into the Centers for Spiritual Living in Seattle back in 2002, I joined the choir shortly after I got there under the leadership of my beloved practitioner and minister, Eric Odell. And that song was one of our signature songs, and we sang it a lot. And so to have that be the opening song for this is just an amazing divine synchronicity, and I so appreciate you listening to Spirit on that one. And when I wandered into the Center for Spiritual Living 12-something years ago, I was searching for something. And I know that you know what that's like, to be searching for something. I was searching for something that I could believe in, something that I could have faith in. And the title of my talk today is Living Freely from Faith. And the whole word faith has a lot of charge for me. That's an old word in my life that never has sat very well with me. And I know that I'm not alone. I was reading a survey recently, I think it was done in 2007, where it said that 44% of all adults have abandoned the teaching of their upbringing, their religious upbringing, and have gone searching for something else. And out of those 44%, Some of us have found our way to new places of believing, and some people are still searching. Well, in 2002, I can tell you I was searching. I was searching for some meaning in my life and something that I could have faith in. And so when I look at the word faith, it comes from childhood experiences that were not so positive. I grew up in a fundamentalist Christian home with a fundamentalist Christian minister father. And by fundamentalist, what I mean is he took a literal interpretation of the Bible and the religious beliefs and dogma of the beliefs that he so firmly held, and he applied that literally to our lives. And so I had lots of questions. I had a lot of questions. Some things, frankly, just didn't make quite a lot of sense, right? Especially the whole heaven-hell thing, that didn't make sense to me. And the teaching that anyone who hadn't wandered into our particular religion were going to hell, it just didn't make sense. And so I would ask questions, lots of questions. And my father would entertain them for, about 2 minutes. And he would get to that point where his knowledge or theology would stop, and he would say, honey, you're just going to have to take that on faith. If you have faith, it will someday all make sense to you. Well, so faith began to mean to me like a blind trusting of teaching, and it just didn't work for me. So as soon as I could, I got out and got away and began to look for something, literally, out of here. So I distanced myself from religion. I distanced myself from anything to do with spirituality, and that had nothing to do with who I was. So I can tell you that my friends and people who knew me then were probably pretty surprised to see me finding a new way of living and a new philosophy to believe in. So when I went into the Centers for Spiritual Living and to New Thought in general, I found that these principles are things that you practice. And I love that David Alt teaches us to prove the principle, to actually practice this stuff, and it makes sense. So what did I find? What are our teachings? What do we have? I know I saw some people stand up. You're here for the very first time. So you may be wondering, what does this place teach? What do these people believe? Our Declaration of Principles is a good place to start. That's really, truly what we believe. But Ernest Holmes, our founder, taught 3 basic things. And his brother, Fenwick, wrote a biography of his life, and he talked about the 3 basic teachings. Now, Ernest Holmes wrote a lot of books, so the fact that we can boil them down into 3 things is pretty miraculous. But there are 3 overriding principles. The first thing Ernest Holmes taught is that God is all there is. So when I wrap my brain around that, what that means to me is that there is a divine intelligence and a power that built the universe, that created the moon and the stars and the starfish and the snowflakes and puppies and kittens and all of us, and it's all spirit. It's all made of the same stuff. That makes sense to me scientifically. And then what I know is that because everything is God, then myself as a spiritual being is always having a relationship with spirit in another form, in another situation. So it's all God. And when I can live knowing that deeply, I am freer. I am much, much freer. The second thing that Ernest Holmes taught is that we co-create our lives with our free will in relationship with the divine. So we are co-creating our lives. And how we do that is that we are responsible for what's inside of us. And whatever we believe, whatever we live from, whatever we think, what we talk about, all of our consciousness, our awareness, our perspective inside of us creates a magnetic field, and we draw to us things that match us. So I know that if inside of me I am loving and kind and generous and abundant and all those beautiful things, then I will continue to run into those beautiful things in my life. And when I get off course and I get judgmental and feeling lack, guess what? That shows up too. And so I know that if I want to create my life differently than it is right now, what do I have to do? I have to work on what's inside of me. And I've practiced that, and I know that that works, that when I work on me, my life gets better. So I'm free to choose. So he teaches that God is all there is. We co-create with that. And the third overriding thing he teaches is unity. He teaches that silver thread that runs through all spiritual teachings, which is do unto others. And that makes sense as a child. You're taught that all your life. But as a spiritual concept, that one was hard for me. That just kind of was a mind bender for me. It's like we're all one. I just don't get it. So I thankfully drew to me teachers that taught that in a lot of different ways. And the analogy that made the most sense to me is the ocean. So you have a fish that's in the ocean, and the ocean is also in the fish. And where does the ocean end and the fish begin? Where does the fish end and the ocean begin? It's really one. The seaweed, everything that's in the ocean also has the ocean in it. That makes sense to me. And what I do to the ocean, I'm doing to the fish. What happens to the fish happens to the ocean. That makes sense. So we are all in an ocean of universal intelligence and an atmosphere, and so what we do to another is what happens to us. So I know that what I wish for another person, how I judge another person, how I think of another person, I'm really thinking of myself. So if you wonder what your life's about, your life is about what's inside of you. And your relationship to yourself is actually your relationship to the divine. Think about that for a second. So when I live by these three principles in my life, these three knowings, I am freer. I am freer to prove these principles in actual living. So when does this make a difference in my life? How does that make a difference to live by the principles? I think it makes the most difference when we are at moments of what I call big choices. When we have a big choice to make. Okay, so this is a part of the talk where you have to keep your elbows to yourself. So you're not going to be nudging your neighbor because you all know what's going on in each other's lives, right? All right. So elbows in, all right? So this is a universal experience, and I call it the paralysis of choice, or choice paralysis. When we have a big decision to make, and it tends to happen around the big themes in life. So let's go with relationships, all right? So you're in a situation and you're facing a relationship-oriented thought, such as, should I break up with him? Should I ask him to marry me? Should I put myself back on the dating market? My relationship is okay. It doesn't make my heart sing. It's good enough, but I don't know. Maybe I should just stay where I am. But what if Mr. Right's just right around the corner? Or what if Mrs. Right is just waiting for me? So you're just frozen with the what ifs. What if I meet someone and he's worse than this person? You know, that's always a possibility, right? So relationships are those moments when we can get absolutely frozen in our what ifs. Careers are another one. Should I take the position? Should I not? Well, what if I don't like that boss any more than I like this boss, but I don't really feel fulfilled, but it's good enough. It's a paycheck. It's, all those things. So you don't know whether or not to take that next step in your career. And so sometimes you wake up and 5 years later, you're still sitting in the what ifs, right? Because we're paralyzed with these choices. So moving is another one. Should I move? My house, should I move? Should I go to the other city? I have an opportunity in that other city, but I don't know anybody there. I don't have any clue as to, I don't even know where Kroger is there. How am I going to survive in a whole nother place? I know what this is about, so moving is another one. Another one is health issues. Like you get a diagnosis and you have this treatment option, and that specialist, and this medicine, and everything has side effects, and oh gosh, I don't even know what to do, right? So the what if moment that we can what if ourselves to death. We can just be frozen in that. And so I personally think that we were scarred for life by a television show. I do. So by a show of hands, how many of you in the 60s and 70s, okay, I'm showing my age, but how many of you watched a show called Let's Make a Deal? All right, so the good, at least I'm talking to the choir here, so to speak. But for those of you who didn't raise your hand and you don't know about the show, don't worry, I'll explain it a little bit. So here's how it works. There's a big, colorful audience. People are dressed up to get attention, right? They're dressed up like chickens and gypsies and clowns or whatever. They're trying to get the attention of the host. The host's name is Monty Hall, okay? And I said in first service, I'll say it again. If I say Monty Python, it's because Python follows Monty in my life way more than Hall. But at any rate. Exactly. So I won't break into my British accent, although I want to really, really bad. Okay, so the colorful audience is out there, and Monty Hall will say something like, do you have a stapler? Does anybody have a stapler? And sure enough, someone will pull out a stapler, and he'll trade them for $1,000, and they're just so happy. It's a great deal, right? But in our more dramatic moments on the show, what he would say is, does anybody have something really random? Like, say, does anybody have a yo-yo, right? So Lord knows what these people carried to the show, but sure enough, someone in the audience would have a yo-yo. And if anybody in the audience has a yo-yo, see me after the service. But so he would say, would you like to trade your yo-yo for what's behind door number 1, behind door number 2, or behind door number 3? And so the person, excited, she's so excited, she's jumping up and down, she's got a yo-yo, and she's going to get something bigger for that yo-yo, right? And so the audience starts yelling, door number 1, pick door number 2, pick door number 3. And she's confused, and she's looking around like, which one? And so for our story, let's just say she picks door number 1. So behind door number 1, with much fanfare and drama, they open door number 1, and it's a brand new washer and dryer. Yay! She gets to trade her yo-yo for a washer and dryer, right? And in the 60s and 70s, that's a big prize. I don't know why. And as a young child who had to rotate the laundry, as I call it, that was not a good prize. But they were happy. She was so happy. And so then, Monty Hall wouldn't leave that alone. You know, he said, okay, do you want to take your washer and dryer, or you want to trade it for what's behind door number 2 or what's behind door number 3? And so she thinks, and then the audience is yelling at her. And so she decides to pick what's behind door number 2. She's going to give up her washer and dryer for behind door number 2. And they open door number 2. They slide back, and there's a brand new car. Oh my gosh, she has won the big prize of the day. The big prize. She is so excited. And I'm literally jumping up and down. Everybody's excited, and at home I was so thrilled for her. She has a brand new car. I could understand that one. That was good, right? And so then he would say, do you want to keep your new car? Or do you want to go for what's behind number 3? Most of the time they're going to stop at the new car. They're really going to stop. However, Monty Hall always shows you what she didn't pick, right? They're going to show you whether or not you made a good choice or not. So they roll back the door for number 3, and it's a brand new billy goat. A billy goat. And the music goes something like this. Wah, wah, wah. Right? Okay, so universally we know the billy goat is really not a good prize. It's actually quite disappointing. It can be embarrassing if you get the billy goat on the first try. And so at home as a child, I learned so much. We all learned so much from Let's Make a Deal. We did. We did. We learned several things. And one thing we learned is that people around us are going to have an opinion about your choice, even if they don't know one lick better than you do. They do. It's true. People are always telling you, pick this, pick that, do this, do that. I'm sure that there are a few, Let's Make a Deal, fanatics that have studied what's likely to behind what door or whatever. But those have got to be few and far between, right? So why she was listening to the rest of the audience, I'm not sure. But nonetheless, people have a lot of opinions about what your choices are. So you have to be careful who you listen to when you're at that moment. The second thing I learned from Let's Make a Deal, and I actually learned it to a fault, and that is stop at good enough. Stop at good enough. When you have your washer and dryer and it's good enough, just hold there. Hold there. And so as I lived by that principle, I found myself in relationships that were not satisfying me or weren't making my soul happy, but I would just stay. This is good enough. Or if I had a job and someone would say, well, at least it's a paycheck. Anytime someone starts the words with at least, they're encouraging you to stay with good enough. At least, at least, at least. Well, why do we settle for at least? I'm not quite sure. But good enough is good enough. And I learned that from Let's Make a Deal. And I think that's really impactful in our lives. And then another thing I learned is that behind every choice, you think you've made a choice, guess what? There's another choice. And then there's another choice, and there's another door, and there's another opportunity. So you're never done choosing, and I learned that from Let's Make a Deal, right? But the big thing I learned from Let's Make a Deal is at all cost, avoid the billy goats. Avoid them. When you've got your life good, and that's the whole good enough thing, because good enough's not a billy goat, okay? A washer and dryer is not a billy goat. So you learn to live life avoiding the billy goats. But unfortunately, or actually in my case, fortunately, those billy goats do show up. And I can tell you that I decided very, very, very young that I wanted to be a mom. I really, really wanted to be a mom. I decided it as a young girl. And so I had a goal that I wanted to be a mom. I wanted to have a baby by the time I was 30, right? So my 20s are kind of going along and going along. I'm having a great time. I definitely have a good enough life. I'm having a good time. But I still have this deep, deep, deep desire to be a mom. And so as my 20s started to wind down, I started to try to get pregnant. And I had a challenging experience of infertility. And sometimes I look at that as I think God really wanted me to really, really be sure and choose for sure that I wanted to be a mom. And so I persevered through all of that. And on the day, 10 days before I turned 30, I found out I was pregnant. It was so exciting, so very, very exciting. I was thrilled. I was so excited. Those of you in the room who went through that pregnancy with me know how joyful that was. That was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful 9 months of my life. And I especially liked all the eating part. That was great. Great. So anyway, it's going through, it's going along, and I'm so excited. I just know I'm headed for a door to experience abundance and joy and cuddling and all that stuff that comes from being a mom. And on February 24th, 1995, my daughter was born. My daughter, Kelsey, who many of you know. And she was born with an incomplete spine and a 3-chambered heart. And so for those of you who know anything about anatomy, you know that a 3-chambered heart will not support life for very long. And so all of a sudden, I realized I was having a profound billy goat experience. I was incredibly devastated. I was disappointed. I was confused. I was scared. It was really, really, really difficult. It was probably the most challenging thing I've ever done in my entire life. And I realized really quickly that the thing I learned from Let's Make a Deal was you have another choice to make. And the choice that I had to make as a new mom was, how was I going to respond to this? What was going to be the place that I lived from in this really different, unexpected situation? And I had one of the voices that was talking to me in that situation was a friend who also had a special needs child who went through a lawsuit and claimed medical malpractice and got a lot of money. She got a settlement from that, and she was saying, Sue, you should sue, you should sue. And I realized that very clearly that just did not feel right to me. And so I decided very clearly I was not going to live this experience from an angle and a perspective of anger and disappointment and fear, and I didn't want to gather all the evidence and all that and fight. That just didn't work for me. I decided that I needed to love my child with all of my heart, and that's where my energy needed to go in order for me to get through this experience. I had to move into the deep love that was available to me in that moment. And so I knew I had to choose that. And I think anytime we're in a billy goat moment, we have to choose where are we coming from as we go through this experience, right? And so what I can say now with 19 years perspective, my daughter is 19, she's going to college, she's quite healthy for all of the things that she copes with on a daily basis. But she is my biggest and wisest spiritual teacher. She has taught me more than any other person who's ever interfaced with my life. That spirit that I call Kelsey is profoundly wise, and she's unique, and she has taught me much about my inner strength. She's taught me about patience and nurturing and all of the things that you want to learn as a mom. So sometimes I get asked, did you choose this? Do you think on a conscious level you chose? Did you choose to have a special needs child? I can say not that I know of. I'm not aware in this lifetime that I chose this, but I do know that I chose to live a life of greater and greater wisdom. I chose to live a life where I get to choose love in a big way. I chose to live a life where I grew spiritually. And so this is the way that the divine gave that to me. And so I know that my billy goat experience is not unique. That if you look at the challenges of your life that you've had, those unexpected setbacks that we call setbacks, or disappointments, or, twists in the road that you weren't expecting, there, in those moments you will find the greatest wisdom and the greatest opportunity to make a different choice for your life. So avoiding the billy goats, I don't know, is the greatest wisdom. So what would Ernest Holmes say about our let's make a deal moments in life? What would he say? What would he teach us? What do we believe about that? Well, let's go back to what he taught. He taught that God is all there is. So behind every door, behind every choice, is all of the wisdom, all of the peace, all of the love, all of the joy, all of the harmony, all of the things that we call God are in every choice, to the degree that we're willing to experience it, to the degree that we're willing to look for it and see it. Behind every door is God. The other thing he taught us is that we co-create, right? So our consciousness, our perspective, our beliefs, our choices, our thoughts, our words brought us to this moment where we're standing in front of our choices, and we have to know that behind every door is that same thing. It's our consciousness, our perspective, our beliefs are right behind every single door. Immediately behind the door, there may be a washer and dryer or a car or a billy goat, but beyond that is just more of us responding and interacting with Spirit. So it doesn't really matter which door we choose, because I believe that we chose our life lessons before we came into this incarnation. We chose what we came here to learn. And so those lessons are down whatever path we pick. It may look a little different, but down every path, but there we go. That's our consciousness laid out before us, no matter which door we pick. And then the third thing he taught us was it's all one. Behind every door is us. We are behind every choice. We are in every relationship that we encounter. We are in every diagnosis that we encounter. We are in every career. We're in every job. We're in every city we live in. Wherever you go, there you are. There's a saying, wherever you go, there you are. And that's the truth of this moment as well, and that's what Ernest Holmes would teach us. But what his primary teaching is that we are always, always, always at choice. We have the free will to choose and choose again and choose again. And if you don't like what you chose 30 minutes ago, guess what? You can choose again right now. So in conclusion, what I'll say is, and I say it to Spirit, bring on the billy goats. Bring on the good enough. Bring on the joy and abundance that's mine in this lifetime. Bring it all on. Because when I know how life works, and I know the principles that guide life and how it works, then I am free. I am free to choose to trade my yo-yos with anything, with any door. I'm free. I am free because I know how it works, and I know how God is divinely guiding my steps in every moment. I know this for me, and I know this for you. And so it is.